They mocked her when she carried the baby into town, wrapped in deerskin, and tied against her chest with nothing but an old flour sack for support. The sun was high that day, and Clara Renly didn't flinch beneath its heat, or the stairs. She walked straight past the blacksmith's forge, the saloon with its creaking porch swing, the general store where Miss Della gasped audibly from behind the glass. "She's gone full mad," someone whispered. "Not even her own blood," another spat. "That ain't no Christian child." Clara kept walking. Her boots were cracked, and her fingers ached from days of travel, but she didn't slow. The child nestled against her chest, stirred, letting out a soft grunt that sounded too weary for something so small. She reached the edge of town and stopped near the churchyard gate. Bent and split from the storm 2 weeks back, never repaired. There, in the half-shadow, she waited. She wasn't sure for what. Maybe for Reverend Tilson to come ask questions. Maybe for Sheriff Boyd to tell her she had no right. But no one came. They just stared. The baby, maybe 5 weeks old by her best guess, had been left behind after the skirmish near Dry Canyon. Clara had found him half-wrapped in a torn bundle, lying beside a blood-soaked blanket, still trying to cry though his voice was raw. There had been no one else. Just wind, smoke, and silence. The child had copper skin, dark hair, and eyes like river stone. He didn't cry much anymore. Just looked at her with that unreadable calm that made even grown men uneasy. A ranch hand leaned against the post office railing and called out, "What you plan to do, raise him like a pet?" Someone else laughed. Clara didn't answer. She wasn't sure herself what she planned to do, but leaving him there among the broken was never an option. By sundown, she returned to her brother's abandoned shack 2 miles east of town. She lit a fire, boiled water, fed the baby goat's milk with a hollowed spoon. And when he finally slept, she sat beside him with her rifle across her knees, staring out into the dark, like she was waiting for a storm no one else could feel. She didn't know where the child had come from, didn't know who he belonged to. But something deep in her bones told her this. Someone out there did know, and someone was coming. The baby didn't stir when the dog started barking down by the creek. Clara did. She was on her feet before the echoes stopped, rifle already in her hands, eyes scanning the window's edge. It wasn't just noise, it was warning. The kind of barking that had rhythm, urgency, like something ancient had stepped into the trees. She stepped outside quietly, moonlight cutting across the frost-covered ground. Her boots crunched once, then stopped. The cabin was still, but the woods weren't. At the tree line, just beyond the edge of the frost's reach, something moved. A figure, tall, still, watching. Not approaching, not threatening, just there. Clara didn't raise the rifle. Something told her not to. "Whoever you are," she called softly. "He's still breathing because I was there." The figure didn't answer. Then, as silently as it had come, it turned and slipped back into the darkness. No snap of branches, no brush disturbed. Gone like smoke. Clara stood there for a full minute before backing inside, heart pounding like a war drum. She bolted the door, fed the fire, laid the rifle by her side again. In the morning she found tracks in the ash outside. Not boot prints. Moccasins. Light, but deliberate. They circled the cabin once, then paused beneath the window where Jonah had slept. She crouched low, brushing her fingers along the cold earth. Whoever it was, they hadn't come to harm. They could have. The tracks told her that. No weapon prints, no panic. But they had come close enough to listen, close enough to smell the smoke of her hearth and see the way she cradled the child. Clara sat by the doorway most of that day, baby wrapped against her chest, staring at the woods. In town, they'd already spun new stories. Miss Della claimed Clara was nursing the child with wild herbs, chanting over him in Apache tongue. The pastor said it wasn't hate driving the town, it was protection. A child like that invited danger. Spirits, raiders, retaliation. But out here, it wasn't spirits Clara feared. It was silence, the kind that watches from the trees and waits for a mother to prove herself. That night, she added more wood to the fire, sang a low lullaby she barely remembered from her childhood, and laid her hand against Jonah's tiny chest. If his people were watching, she wanted them to know something. She wasn't keeping him. She was keeping him alive. 3 days passed without another sighting. Clara tended to the baby, gathered water from the creek, split kindling, and listened. Always listened. The baby, whom she'd started calling Eli, short for Elon, was stronger now, his eyes following her as she moved. He still cried little, but when he did, it was deep and sudden, like thunder from a cloudless sky. On the 4th morning, she found something waiting for her outside the door. A stone. Not just any stone, smooth and flat, dark as coal, placed dead center on the front step. It had been carved with 4 lines, crossing in the center like a compass. It wasn't crude. It was precise, intentional. Clara bent to examine it, her breath catching. She didn't recognize the symbol fully, but she'd seen similar marks before. Apache scouts used stones to send messages, to warn, to claim, to test. She didn't touch it. Not yet. Instead, she stepped back inside, latched the door behind her, and lit every lantern she owned. By midday, the wind picked up, sweeping through the trees like it had a purpose. Clara stood on the porch, baby slung tight to her chest, staring at the horizon. She was being watched. She felt it in her teeth, in her spine, in the stillness of the birds. That afternoon, she saddled the mule and rode into town. Sheriff Boyd met her at the general store, chewing tobacco and looking annoyed before she even opened her mouth. "They're close," she said. He squinted. "Who?" "The baby's people, Apache." He spat toward the dirt. "Told you this would happen. Thought maybe you'd come to your senses." "I didn't come to beg," Clara said, voice level. "I came to warn you. Don't send riders out. Don't make this worse." "Worse?" Boyd snorted. "You brought that worse, missy. You made your bed when you started playing mother to a redskin." Clara didn't flinch. "I didn't make a bed. I built a fire. If they come, it won't be for war. But if this town provokes it..." Boyd stepped close. "If anything happens to my town, I won't hesitate." She looked him dead in the eye. "Then maybe pray someone else does." Clara rode home in silence, her jaw tight. That night she moved her bedroll to the floor by the door, her rifle resting beside it. She'd made her choice. And now someone was coming to answer it. Not in hate, not in violence, but in judgment. Clara woke just after midnight, heart pounding before her eyes had even opened. The fire had gone low, casting only faint amber shadows across the cabin walls. Outside, the wind had died. The stillness was complete. Not a dog barked, not a single owl called. She rose slowly, not wanting to jostle Eli where he slept, bundled in the cradle beside the hearth. Her hand found the rifle before her feet found the ground. A knock, so soft it might have been imagined, tapped against the door. She didn't speak, just moved toward it like breath, quiet and deliberate. When she opened it, she found him. A man stood there, tall and motionless, draped in worn buckskin and shadow. His hair was braided, black as raven wings. His face was expressionless but not cold. He stood in complete stillness, eyes fixed on hers. No weapon in sight, no malice, just purpose. Clara didn't speak first. He lifted his hand slowly and extended something forward. A charm of bone and woven cord, one she recognized. It had hung around Eli's neck when she found him, nearly lost in the soot. She'd taken it off to keep it safe, thinking it sacred. She swallowed. He's inside, alive, federal, safe. Still, he said nothing. But his eyes moved, not to her rifle, not to the ground, but to the doorway, as if asking. Clara stepped aside. He entered without a word. His moccasins made no sound on the cabin floor. When he reached the cradle, he knelt, not to take the child, but simply to look. A long, silent moment passed. Then Eli stirred, opened his eyes, and reached out. No cry, no fear. His fingers curled around the man's thumb. The man closed his eyes. A tremor passed through his shoulders. Barely noticeable, but Clara saw it. When he looked at her again, there were words in his silence. Respect, thanks, maybe something more. He stood, nodded once, then moved toward the door. "You're his father, aren't you?" she asked softly. He paused, then reached into the pouch at his side and pulled out a small bundle. Roots, herbs, cloth. He placed it on the table beside the fire. A gesture, not of debt, but of offering. "He needs both," Clara said. "What's yours by blood, and what I gave by choice." The man looked at her for a long, deep second. Then, just once, he nodded. And then he was gone. The door closed with barely a sound, and for the first time since the baby came, Clara felt something settle deep inside her. He didn't come to take. He came to see if she truly stayed. By morning, the air felt changed. Cleaner somehow, like the night had taken something away when it left. Clara boiled water while Eli cooed near the fire, his little fists batting the air. She kept glancing at the doorway, half expecting the man to return. He didn't. But he had left more than herbs on her table. He'd left clarity. She didn't just feel watched anymore. She felt trusted. But townfolk didn't trust what they couldn't control. And by midday, word had already spread. Reverend Tilson arrived first, riding his gray mare like he was delivering thunder from heaven. He dismounted with the slow drama of judgment and barely knocked before pushing the door open. "I heard you had company in the night," he said, voice tight. Clara didn't look up from her stitching. "You heard right." "Apache?" She looked up then, fixing him with the steady calm she'd been learning from the very people he feared. "A man. A father. No different than you, except maybe braver." The Reverend's face pinched. "You think it wise, inviting devils into your home?" "I didn't invite him," she said. "He came to see his son. He left peace behind." Tilson's gaze flicked to Eli, then to the charm now tied gently back around the baby's neck. "That's not your child, Clara." "But he is mine," she said simply, "because I didn't leave him in the dirt." He studied her for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "People are whispering, saying you've been bewitched, that you're consorting with what don't belong in God's order." "Then maybe they ought to wonder if God's order includes kindness," she said. He stepped back like she'd struck him. "There's a prayer circle forming tonight," he said. "They plan to ask the Lord for protection. You should pray they don't decide to act instead." He left without waiting for a goodbye. That night, Clara didn't sleep. She kept Eli close and listened. But no torches came, no shouts, just the soft sound of the wind rustling through dry trees and coyotes howling somewhere far off. She rose early, fetched water from the old well near the edge of the woods. As she leaned over the stone lip, a figure approached. Moonleaf, the Comanche trader's daughter who passed through twice a season. Moonleaf said nothing, just handed Clara a folded cloth. Inside was a small painted feather and a single line of words in careful English. You were not forgotten. Clara looked up, but the girl was already walking away. Not everyone in the West judged her. Some had begun to see her not as a woman who stole a child, but as one who stayed when others ran. The first torch didn't come from the church crowd. It came from Amos Pike's sons, drunk on their father's moonshine and fed lies by Reverend Tilson's sermon. Clara saw them before they reached the porch. 3 shadows moving fast, boots loud in the dust, one of them carrying a bottle stuffed with cloth. She was ready, rifle in hand. Eli swaddled tight in a basket under the floorboards she'd pried loose the night before. They didn't knock, just shouted, "Give him up, witch! You're bringing devils to our doorstep! I got fire for your Indian charm!" The bottle hit the wall and shattered, flames licking up the timber. Clara fired into the air, one loud crack that sent birds flying from the trees. The boys scattered, but not before one caught her eye through the dark. Jeb Pike, the youngest. He looked scared, almost sorry. Then he ran. The flames were out by dawn, but the message was clear. The town had stopped whispering. Now they were threatening. Clara stayed awake through the next day, rocking Eli with one hand, cleaning the rifle with the other. Her jaw clenched, her heart tight. She'd known it might come to this, but not so soon, not with such cowardice. Near sunset, Crowfire came. He rode alone, bareback, with no weapon showing, but his eyes were storm. When Clara opened the door, he said only, "We saw the fire." "They'll try again," she said. He nodded once. "You will not be alone." That night, 2 more braves camped at the edge of the clearing. Silent shadows, respectful and distant, but present, watching. Clara left them stew by the rocks without a word. By the second morning, Sheriff Boyd came down the trail, hat in hand and jaw tight. "You planning to start a war?" he asked. "No," Clara said, stepping onto the porch with Eli in her arms. "But I won't run from one either." He looked past her, to the figures half visible in the trees. "We got a problem, Miss Renly." "We had one the day you chose silence over justice." He exhaled hard. "If they come again, and blood spills?" Clara cut him off. "Then it won't be the tribe's blood first. That much I promise you." The sheriff stared at her for a long moment, then nodded, almost to himself, and walked away. That night, when Eli cried, Clara hummed a lullaby, not to hush him, but to steady her own trembling hands. She had made a home from the wreckage of hate. And now the valley itself stood behind her. It was near the end of the week when he returned. Not Crowfire, but the man from the first night. Eli's father. Clara spotted him just after sunrise, standing on the ridge beyond the creek, his silhouette haloed by mist. This time, he came down the hill and approached openly, still no weapon, still that measured calm. Clara stepped out to meet him. Eli bundled close. She didn't speak, not right away. He nodded toward the child, then toward the forest, then pointed at her, 3 fingers, sharp and slow. "You, child, stay." The words came in broken English, deep and certain. His voice was like low thunder, controlled but fierce. "I stay," Clara replied, voice even. He nodded once, then extended his hand. Not to take the baby, but to give her something. A painted strip of hide. Red, black, and gold, etched with symbols she didn't fully understand. "For counsel," he said. Clara's brows drew. "Counsel?" He pointed toward the east, toward the wide river that marked the edge of tribal land. "Elders. They want me to come?" He held her eyes. "You mother now." Something swelled in Clara's chest. a strange mix of pride and fear. She had fought so long just to keep Eli alive. Now they were asking her to be seen, heard, maybe even trusted. "I'll come," she said softly. He nodded again and turned to leave. But after a few steps, he paused, turned back, and spoke a name. Roka. It took her a beat to realize he was giving her his name. "Clara," she said in return. That was all. He vanished into the trees again, quiet as always. The next morning she packed a few things: milk, blankets, the charm, the painted strip, and strapped Eli to her chest. Crowfire led her eastward through the brush, no words between them, only shared resolve. They arrived at a grove marked with totems and stones. A fire burned low in the center. Around it sat 5 elders, faces lined like folded leather, eyes sharp with knowing. Clara stepped forward. No one asked her name. No one asked why she had come. The oldest woman simply said, "We saw you hold him when no one else would." Another said, "We heard you refuse to run." And the third, a man with cloud-white hair, said, "Now we must decide. Does the boy walk with 2 shadows or only one?" Clara stood taller. "He walks with both," she said, "and I will walk with him." The fire cracked once, and the elders said nothing, but none turned her away. For the first time, Clara wasn't just defending a child. She was claiming him. 2 nights after the council, smoke rose behind Clara's cabin, thick and black, curling above the trees like a signal no one wanted to see. Crowfire found her at the edge of the river, baby on her back, gathering wild roots taught to her by the elder women. His face was hard when he dismounted. "Town sent 3 men," he said. "They burned your place." Clara blinked once. "Anyone hurt?" "Number we were watching." She closed her eyes, jaw clenched. The cabin hadn't been much, just her brother's old hunting shack, half falling apart and patched with tin. But it had been hers and Eli's, and they'd burned it out of spite, out of fear, out of weakness pretending to be righteousness. "I want to see it," she said. Crowfire didn't argue. He rode beside her as she walked the trail back west, Eli asleep against her chest. When they crested the last rise and looked down on the clearing, her breath caught. The shack was gone. Just a skeleton of scorched beams and curling smoke. But what struck her more was the circle of stones surrounding it, 12 of them, set deliberately, evenly spaced, each marked with a different symbol from the tall elk tribe. "They came after the fire," Crowfire said, voice low, "to honor what stood." Clara walked into the ruins slowly, her boots crunching on ash. She stood where the hearth had been, the stone base still warm. "They'll come again," she said. "Yes. And they'll keep coming, won't they?" Crowfire looked at her. "Until they fear shame more than they fear change." She nodded, then knelt in the ashes and whispered to Eli. "You were born in fire. Let them try to burn what's already survived." Later that night, she sat with the elders again. This time, Roka was there, seated across from her in the circle. "She lost her home," Crowfire told them. "She found her voice," said the white-haired elder. They spoke of protection, of ceremony, of choosing names not just for the child, but for Clara, too. She listened, stunned, as one by one they agreed to something she hadn't expected. "Let the town see who stands with her," one said. "She will walk with us," another added. "Let them know her child is not alone." When Clara rose, Roka followed her outside. He looked down at the baby, then at her. "They will not mock you again," he said. "Not with all of us behind you." And in that moment, Clara knew. This was no longer just about surviving. It was about belonging. They came at sunrise, on horseback, on foot, with torches hidden beneath coats and anger masked as righteousness. Nearly a dozen men from town, led by Amos Pike himself and flanked by his sons. Clara saw them coming long before they reached the ridge. She didn't wake Eli. She just tightened the wrap across her chest and stepped out of the lodge the tribe had offered her. She was not alone. Behind her, in a wide crescent formation, stood nearly 20 members of the tall elk tribe, warriors, elders, even children, not armed for war, but standing firm, grounded in presence. Roka stood to Clara's right, arms crossed over his chest. Crowfire stood to her left, spear planted in the earth. When Amos reached the edge of the clearing, he stopped, startled by the sight. He hadn't expected unity. He'd expected a woman on her knees. "That baby don't belong to you," Amos growled, dismounting. "You've got the whole town uneasy. Bringing the redskins down from the hills? You think this ends in peace?" Clara stepped forward, her voice steady. "It ends how you choose. You came to take what isn't yours. That child is savage blood." "He's alive because I stayed," she shot back. "And he stays alive because of them," she gestured to the tribe. "And because of me. He has a mother. He has a people. He doesn't need saving. You do." One of the men near Amos shifted, uneasy. Another lowered the stick he was holding. "You think you're one of them now?" Amos spat. "I don't have to be one of anything," Clara said, "but I am something you'll never be." Amos raised a hand, signaling his boys forward. But then a deep voice called out, "Enough!" All heads turned as Sheriff Boyd stepped into the clearing, rifle slung but not raised. He looked tired, and maybe ashamed. "I told you last week," he said. "If blood spills, I hold the one who drew it first responsible." He looked at Clara. "She's not the threat here." Then he turned to the town men. "Go home. Burn one more thing. Touch that child, or aim one rifle where it doesn't belong, and I'll jail you myself." For a long beat, no one moved. Then Amos Pike turned on his heel and mounted up. One by one, the others followed. When the last rider disappeared beyond the trees, Clara felt something break open in her chest. Not fear, not relief, but the beginning of something stronger. Eli stirred against her chest and let out a soft sound. She smiled down at him. "They saw you today," she whispered. "All of you." Spring came soft that year, not with wild blooms or dancing rains, but with a quietness that settled over the valley like a breath finally exhaled. The cabin remained ash and memory, but a new one rose beside the creek, built with cedar, pine, and the steady hands of those who once called Clara outsider. Roka carved its beams himself. Moonleaf painted its doorway with symbols of protection, and the elders declared the land shared, not borrowed. Clara never asked for a title, but they gave her one anyway. Mother of the Valley. Not out loud at first, just in passing words, nods, the way children stopped crying when she held them, the way warriors lowered their weapons when she approached. Eli learned to walk with moccasins on his feet and a cedar whistle in his mouth. He spoke both English and Apache by his second winter, and knew the names of every bird that flew over the ridgeline by his third. The town no longer spit at her shadow. Some even came seeking help. When fever swept through Pike's ranch, it was Clara who brewed willow bark and carried it down the trail. Amos never said thank you, but his youngest son returned the favor by nailing shut the church doors when someone tried to stir another crowd. Even Sheriff Boyd changed. He started coming by with books for Eli, asking quiet questions, standing longer than necessary. He never admitted he was learning, but Clara knew. One morning, Roka returned after 2 months gone. He stood at the edge of her garden, watching Eli chase chickens in a half-circle blur. Clara came out, wiping her hands on her apron. "You're late," she said. He smirked, barely. "He grows fast." Too fast. They watched the boy for a long while. Then Roca said, "You gave him life." Clara looked over. "So did you." "I gave him breath," he replied. "You gave him a name." She didn't answer right away. Just turned toward the fields where smoke curled from 3 more cabins. Women, elders, a child born last moon. All of them drawn here since Clara took in the child no one else dared touch. "Are you staying?" she asked. "I might." They said nothing else. That night, under a sky riddled with stars, the tribe gathered at the fire circle. They sang for the seasons, for the ancestors, and for the child who once lay alone in the ash. Clara held Eli in her lap, his head resting against her collarbone. And when the elder lifted her hand and spoke the name Mother of the Valley, no one objected. Because she was, and always would be.